In 2013, a national air cargo Boeing 747 lost control and crashed almost immediately after takeoff from Bagram, Afghanistan. The investigation and eventual NTSB report concluded that heavy cargo had likely broken loose and slid to the back of the plane, throwing it off balance and damaging controls. So how does a change in balance crash an aircraft? How can we ensure our own aircraft are flown within safe limits? These are some of the questions I hope to answer today.
Hello random viewer, and welcome to a video on weight and balance in aviation. Starting with that first part, every aircraft has a maximum weight at which it can legally be flown. To find that maximum weight, check your aircraft's POH, owner's manual, or other documents that your flight school might provide. For now, just know that that weight was picked for a variety of reasons ranging from structural to aerodynamic considerations, and that exceeding it is not only illegal but very unsafe.
Those who have been with the channel for a long time may remember when I used to make videos of Kerbal Space Program, which was a space and flying game, but it actually is pretty helpful here. You can construct an aircraft and change the weight and balance on it and see how it is affected quite easily. So here I can increase the weight at the forward and back of the aircraft and demonstrate the differences between a very lightly loaded aircraft, which will be presented on the left side of the screen, and a very heavily loaded aircraft, which will be on the right side of the screen. Both are properly balanced, but because the plane has the same engines making the same thrust, more weight will result in a slower acceleration. This is simply using Newton's second law of force equals mass times acceleration. Because the force has not changed, but the mass has, in the upward direction, the acceleration has to decrease to make the equation remain balanced. In practical flying, a heavily loaded aircraft will require more runway to accelerate. It will also not be able to maintain the same climb gradient, and this could be a major problem for a pilot who is not prepared for the changes. Another concern of an overloaded aircraft is structural. Aircraft are designed to take a certain structural load in their wing spars, engine mounts, and a few other key components. These aircraft were also designed to fly through turbulence and be able to make turns and a few other basic maneuvers that put stress on the aircraft. Most trainers are certified in the normal category, and this demands that the plane be able to take about 3.8 Gs safely. That means that the weight of the aircraft is multiplied by 3.8 if it is actually experiencing that acceleration. You can actually see the wings flexing in this mock-up in Kerbal Space Program at around 3 Gs. And that is natural, that's very normal, and within safe limits that is completely fine. It becomes a problem if the plane is overloaded. An aircraft that is overloaded by 100 pounds is not truly being stressed by 100 pounds. It's being stressed by about 380 pounds if it experiences turbulence or any kind of maneuver capable of taking it to its limit load factor or limit G-forces. So any overload is not only as bad as it seems, but is also multiplied and can be even worse on the structure. Fatigue damage is also worth bearing in mind, because over time, damage can accumulate. So just because an overload today did not break the wings off does not mean that it did not do damage that could cause that kind of problem later down the line. And that, of course, would be bad.
I'm speaking in extremes. A wing coming off is extremely unlikely in flight thanks to modern technology like eddy currents inspections. Here on the Piper Cherokee, there are 10 bolts that hold on the wing spar and attach it to the central spar. And what the mechanics do is they remove one of these and run an electric current through this wing spar, and they can check for fatigue cracking, the kind that could form if an aircraft is overloaded. Now that said, even if they do catch it, a habit of overloading is going to decrease the lifespan of the aircraft, and should definitely be avoided still.
Moving on to the balance side of the equation, Kerbal Space Program offers another helpful insight. You can see in this diagram there is a black and yellow ball in the middle of the aircraft that's somewhat transparent. And as I shift the weight of cargo around in the aircraft, you can see this ball moving. This is the aircraft's center of mass, or balance point. As the weight shifts, the point where the plane would balance changes. One obvious limitation is the main wheels. If that balance point is too far backwards, the main wheels are not going to support the plane. This is why people loading cargo planes have to be extremely careful to start at the front and work back. If they do it the other way around and the tail becomes too heavy, the plane could begin to tip backwards, and that can actually total a plane like a 747. As far as flying is concerned, there are 3 possible scenarios. The first and most ideal is the plane being properly balanced. This means the center of gravity, or center of mass, is properly balanced within the limitations that the engineers designed. Another possibility is a plane that is too nose-heavy, or the center of mass is too far forward for what the plane can handle. The aircraft on the screen now has been loaded in this nose-heavy condition, It makes the control response somewhat sluggish in the pitch axis, meaning it's difficult to raise the nose or tilt the plane up, especially for landing. So it can lead to a landing that is less than ideal. Another problem with a nose-heavy loading condition has to do with cruise flight. As the aircraft flies, the main wings generate the lift necessary to hold it up, while the horizontal stabilizer and elevators create a downforce to hold up the nose. The wings have to lift that extra weight that is created just to hold up the nose, so minimizing that seems like a great idea to improve fuel economy and speed so that the wings are not generating as much lift and drag. With the weight shifted forward, making the aircraft nose-heavy, you can see that the elevator is deflected up. It's having to make extra downforce just to hold up the weight of the nose, which is trying to drop, to keep the plane flying level. This, of course, means the wings have to work harder to generate more lift to hold up that downforce, which results in more drag and slows the cruise speed. In conclusion, an aircraft that is loaded too nose-heavy or the center of mass is too far forward out of limits, it is going to be difficult to take off and land due to decreased pitch authority, or ability to tilt the plane up. That's because it takes a certain deflection of the elevator just to keep the plane level, so there is less elevator travel available to tilt the nose up. It will also decrease fuel economy and cruising speed. There is one advantage of a nose-heavy condition, though, and this is its stall characteristics. When an aircraft is taken to a stall, or where the angle between the wing and the airstream is too great so that the wing can no longer create lift, a nose-heavy aircraft will self-correct. The nose will drop, the angle of attack will decrease, and it will recover from a stall, all on its own. This is not to say that an aircraft should be loaded out of limits in the nose-heavy condition. However, when performing stall or spin training, it does make sense to put the center of mass as far forward, but still within limits, as possible to maximize the stability improvements during a stall. Looking at the disadvantages of a nose-heavy aircraft, let's go ahead and shift the weight of our simulated airplane as far back as we can get it, and see what kind of improvements we can get. Right away, we can see the speed is increasing. Down in that bottom left corner, the meters per second increased by about 2 or 3, which equates to about 4 extra knots. That's pretty good. Taking it to a stall, though, we see the ugly reality of just how dangerous a tail-heavy condition can be. As the wings begin to stall and stop generating lift, it does not stall evenly. The plane flips over. It has entered a spin. And just look how long it takes. At one point here, the plane is flying backwards because it's so unstable. The tail is supposed to be well behind the center of mass to give plenty of authority to right the plane and put it back into level flight. But with the center of mass too far backwards, the plane loses stability. My simulated crew was extremely lucky that there was just enough stability left to recover from the stall, but when this happens in real life, people are not always so lucky. This is exactly what caused the accident in Bagram. As the weight shifted backwards, the plane was no longer stable. The weight being too far back allowed the nose to rise, and as it rose, the lift moved forward, which is just a characteristic of airfoils, and made the condition even worse. This is why it is so critical that the weight and balance is kept within the limits or envelope that the plane was intended for. With the importance of this in mind, what does it mean to be within the envelope, and how can that be calculated? Well, I hope to answer that with a few basic materials: a pencil, a piece of cardboard, and a few coins. This strip of cardboard is going to represent our airplane. It is exactly 8 inches long with each inch marked. This way we can measure how much the weight will make an impact on the aircraft. We call this moment, and you already know what this is. Let me show you. When attempting to undo a bolt on a tire, if you hold it here, it's very difficult to try to make that bolt move. Reason being is the arm or distance from the force to the rotation point is very short. If you increase the arm by moving out here and then doing it, now all of a sudden the bolt can move. Reason being is that the lever arm, or amount of torque I can put on it, is higher. The amount of force did not change, but the distance did. And if either the distance or the amount of force changes, the moment has changed. Moment is the distance times the weight. Returning to our imaginary airplane that is represented by the cardboard strip, I also have places for the engine, the tail, the wings marked. These are strategic places where I will place some quarters to represent a rough approximation of the weight of an aircraft that is empty, and then from there we can add things like fuel and passengers to see how that affects the weight and balance, and whether or not the horizontal stabilizer and elevator will have enough authority to lift the nose properly for takeoff and landing. We'll start by placing the pencil to represent the wing and main wheels. It'll be the fulcrum on which our airplane balances or rotates. Next, the cardboard that represents the plane is placed on top of this, with the 3-inch mark where the wings are placed on top of the pencil. This way it can pivot on that 3-inch point, fairly similar to the proportions of a real airplane. From here I will begin adding the weight that is roughly accurate to the structure of the airplane. I'm placing 3 quarters, and we're going to say each quarter represents 100 pounds, so 300 pounds at the 1-inch point. This represents the weight of the engine and a lot of the structure at the front of the plane. I usually place 1 quarter at the 7-inch mark to represent the weight of the tail and the structure back there. This is of course a very small and lightweight airplane, but it works for demonstrating the purposes. Now I'm placing 2 quarters at the 2-inch mark. This is going to represent the front seat passengers. I'll add another 2 quarters at the 3-inch mark to represent about 200 pounds of fuel. And lastly, another 2 quarters at the 4-inch mark to represent passengers sitting in the back seat. To make the numbers slightly more similar to the real aircraft, we're going to go ahead and multiply everything by 10. So the 1-inch point is going to be 10 inches, the 2-inch point is going to be 20 inches, and so on. So when you see that in the math, that's what I'm doing. I've just multiplied all of the inches by 10. To calculate where our center of gravity is and whether or not it's in limits, one of the best things to do is set up a chart. So we have whatever the item is, whatever the thing is that we're calculating. Then there's the weight. It's that same equation, weight times arm equals moment. So the empty weight of this aircraft that I represent with the cardboard strip is 400 pounds with the 4 quarters. So we have the aircraft, the empty weight is 400. The arm we calculated out was 25, so 25 times 400, that is about 10,000. So now, continuing another line on the chart, we can keep working our way down. Next item, we have the front seat passengers. We put 2 quarters there, so that's going to be 200 pounds. The arm was 20, so that's going to give us a moment of 4,000 inch-pounds in this case. Fuel, I have another 200 pounds. I'm just making the math easy. Fuel was located at an arm of 30. So 200 times 30, what's that? I just got a helper.
6,000.
So we have a moment of 6,000 inch-pounds for the fuel. Reason being, that fuel is farther from the datum than the front seat passengers. So even though it's the same weight, it's going to have more torque on the total aircraft. Coming across. Now we're doing the back seat. And this has a weight of also 200. We're just making the math real easy. At an arm of 40, here's where the rear seat is. We'll just say there's a seat hiding right back in there. So we have the back seat here, the front seat here, and our fuel tanks in here with our fuel in it, 8,000. Finishing up our graph, now we're moving on to the totals. So you're going to total up all of the weights and all of the moments. This should give us 28,000 inch-pounds for the total aircraft. And then for weight, we're going to have, it looks like 1,000 pounds. This is a very lightly loaded aircraft. And then we just total up the arms, right? No. No, we have to rearrange this equation to figure out what this is because we're multiplying weight and arm to get moment. So total moment divided by total weight equals center of gravity. So what is that?
28.
28. Good. So we have a center of gravity located at 28 inches. That means the plane would balance right here at this point. So our center of gravity is sitting right there at 28 inches. We can also see that the board does just about balance at the 2.8 inch mark, so that math was correct. To test if the airplane is loaded properly, I use a penny. Looking at this, the penny is able to lift the nose. It has enough weight. So that's how I simulate the effective force of the horizontal stabilizer and elevator. If the penny can lift the nose, then we're within limits. So that center of gravity, located at 28 or 2.8 inches here, is sufficient for the weight of a penny to be able to actuate the nose and give the control necessary for safe flight. If we were to rearrange this to make a 100-pound person sit in the front seat and a 300-pound person sit in the back seat, you can see the penny can still move the nose, but the plane is very unstable. Just a small touch of the penny pushed it over the edge, so probably not safe to fly in this tail-heavy condition. Looking in the owner's or airplane flying manual of a given aircraft, you will usually find an envelope like this, or a graph that has weight on the vertical axis and center of gravity position on the horizontal axis. When the math is completed, a point can be plotted with the total weight of the airplane and the balance point or center of gravity position at that weight. You can also calculate the weight after some fuel has been burned or after some passengers have exited the aircraft. At no time should any of these points or any part of a line drawn between those points move outside of the envelope or the safe area for weight and center of gravity position. Now we're going to walk through a more realistic example using a real aircraft, in this case Piper Cherokee November 15472. To find information on this, go ahead and go to the Greenville Aviation website. This is the flight school I currently work for, and they have a wonderful list of all of their aircraft. You can find the tail number, here we go, 15472, and what you're looking for is the weight and balance page, or W&B, and then the weight and balance worksheet. In here, scrolling to the bottom, there is a very helpful document that has the aircraft's empty weight and a few items that need to be tested, just like we did with the cardboard, but in this case for real. We're going to use my spreadsheet that will do the math for us just to save some time. I will not share this with you. I would like you to work through this yourself, but in the interest of saving time for the video, it makes a lot of sense. First of all, the plane needs 6 quarts of oil at a minimum, and it's normally slightly over, so I usually factor in about 13 pounds of oil, with oil being almost 2 pounds for every quart. After that has been entered, you can see it multiplies that 13 by the arm, or 27.5, because in this case, the oil is centered at 27.5 inches from the datum, which is very close to the front of the plane near the spinner at the propeller. And this gives us a moment of 357.5 inch-pounds. Let's move on to the front seat occupants. Say we had a 150-pound person and a 180-pound person, 330 pounds worth of people. So entering that number in, it will multiply the 330 times the arm of 80.5 inches, because those front seats are significantly farther back from the datum than the oil, and this gives us 26,000 inch-pounds. We're going to skip fuel because, as you can see in the worksheet, fuel is included in the lower line. There's a reason for this. We're calculating the balance of the airplane before we add fuel to it. So we'll leave that blank for now. Rear seat occupants, let's say that we had another 200-pound person from our quarter example, and maybe a few bags, but we'll just go ahead and leave it at 200. Almost 24,000 inch-pounds. That is only slightly less than the moment created by the 2 people in the front seat, but because the arm is so much larger, that's why we're getting almost the same moment. Then baggage, I normally factor in at least 10 pounds for the box that has oil and a few other supplies for the airplane, as well as the covers that are kept in the baggage compartment. But if we were bringing a bag, we'd go ahead and maybe say 20 pounds. So 10-pound bag and then 10 pounds worth of covers and other things. And then it multiplies that for us. It does all the math, so it's totaling up this column, totaling up this column, and then this one here is just doing the division for us. And then it handily plots it on the envelope. And you can see we are within limits with 0 fuel. And so once these are all totaled up and the CG is calculated, this would be filled in, and you could plot it on here to see which category we were in. Now that this point is plotted, we can add in the fuel and see what happens. So if we had full fuel of 288 pounds at 48 usable gallons, you can see that point moves up quite a bit, but it's still within limits. And so if we plotted both points and drew a line between them, you would see that at no point are we leaving the envelope, and so this flight could be conducted safely. Using the weight and balance sheet after the 0 fuel center of gravity was calculated, as well as the weight and plotted on the chart, there's an extra column for the starting fuel, and then that point could be plotted. And then for a little more accuracy, we also have fuel used for taxi and in cruise flight to see how it would shift throughout the flight. Drawing a straight line is not perfectly accurate, but as a rough approximation, it works pretty well. On a different day, perhaps only 2 people are going up in 15472, and in this case, it would be 2 people who both weigh 300 pounds. This would put 600 pounds in the front seat, which is too much for the seats, unfortunately. But also, you can see that even though we're within limits as far as weight is concerned, maximum gross weight is 2,450 pounds, and we're well under that. But because that weight is so far forward, you can see that our point has left the envelope, and now we're in that nose-heavy, unsafe area where we might not have enough pitch authority. Flipping that around, say the pilot was really small and maybe only weighed 100 pounds, and those 2 300-pound people were sitting in the back seat. Now we might be out of limits in the tail-heavy position, and that actually went off the chart. Let's say we used 450 pounds. Now you can see we're back on the chart, but still out of limits in the aft direction. So that's what this would look like. A point being outside of this envelope is a serious problem, whether that point is above, forward, or backward of the envelope. Anything outside of that is a problem for the various reasons we discussed.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and that you now have not only a better understanding of how to calculate weight and balance, but also a deeper respect for it. Properly loading an aircraft is vital for any safe flight, and yet complacency is dangerously common in this category. Just because your aircraft has 4 seats does not necessarily mean you can fly with 4 people and full fuel. There might be limitations, and that could be extremely dangerous to exceed. For an even deeper dive on the decision-making and judgment involved in weight and balance, as well as some of the responsibility that a pilot has, I highly recommend a video by Flight 8 Mike Alpha, which will be linked at the top of the description. With some care, basic math, and a little extra effort, ensuring that your aircraft is operated within safe limitations of weight and balance can become a standard part of your pre-flight planning. I beg of you not to fall into complacency here. You know very well what is at stake. And remember, this is not something you just learned for a check ride. This is absolutely essential for a safe flight. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a very nice and safe rest of your day.